Hi, I'm Margot Fraser. I'm a Canadian Certified Professional Ergonomist, and I'll be introducing these methods with you today. This video, Preparing for Work, provides information on how to prepare yourself for work involving manual materials handling. This includes thinking about the work situation and the load so that you can prepare yourself to use the best and safest handling methods for the conditions. To prepare for handling or moving a load, we need to make sure that we are ready both physically and mentally. We can do this by following the safety process of stop, think, and act. First, stop and assess your own state. Then think about the situation, the environment, the load, and how you will move the load. Finally, act in the best and safest manner to avoid injuries. When you stop and assess your own state before starting work, make sure you are focused on the task at hand, that you know the proper work procedures for the work site and materials, and that you are physically prepared. Being physically prepared means that you make sure your body is warm before trying to move anything. Muscles are not as flexible when cold or after they have been in a stationary position, so there's a greater risk of injury. Lifting immediately after sitting can increase your risk of back and other muscle injuries. So take a few minutes to walk around and allow your body to recover. Walking, climbing stairs, and moving your body through the range of motions that will be required to do your job are also good ways to warm up. Do this reach for the sky exercise to help your back recover. Stand and reach over your head as high as possible, and then take a full, deep breath. You can do some shoulder circles, arm circles, and walk with long strides and do gentle trunk rotations. The next step in the stop, think, act process is to think about the work situation. Use the time while you're warming up your body to look around and find out if there are any hazards. If you'll be moving or carrying loads, walk the route and make sure your path is clear. Check to make sure there is somewhere to put the load down when you get to your destination, and be aware of your surroundings. Next, you need to think about the load you will be handling. Check the size, weight, handholds, and if it is unbalanced or awkward to handle. Next, you have to think about your plan to move the load. Your first choice should always be to use moving equipment like forklifts, dollies, and hand trucks, provided you are trained in how to use them. Ask other people to assist you with the load when needed. The last step in the stop, think, and act process is act. Use lifting and moving equipment whenever possible. If you must lift something manually, there are some key safety lifting and moving basics that must be followed. These key basics will be reviewed in the next videos in this series, so that you have the knowledge to make the best possible choices for manual handling. To recap, before you start any manual handling job, stop and make sure that you are physically and mentally prepared for the task. Then think and assess the hazards and the load to plan the best method to handle the material. Once you have thought everything through, then you can act to carry out your plan. If something changes or your plan is not going as anticipated, stop and begin the process again.
I'm Carmel Murphy. I'm a Canadian Certified Professional Ergonomist. This video, Manual Handling Basics, provides information on how to prepare yourself for work involving manual handling. Manual handling can be a high-risk activity for injuring your back muscles and joints, and should only be used when there is no option available for using mechanical lifting and moving equipment. Before you lift or move anything, it is important that you understand the basics of safe material handling. To avoid injuries, always keep the normal S curvature of the spine, as your back is strongest in this position. Make sure you know how much the load weighs. Keep the load as close to the body as possible. Slide the load to you first if it's too far away. Check whether it's balanced before you lift. Get a good grip on the load. When lifting, use the large muscle groups of the butt and legs. To turn, pivot with the load or step through the turn. Do not twist. Get help when you need it. Allow for recovery time if you have a number of loads to move. Before we start talking about specific lifting methods, make sure that you know the stop, think and act process explained in the Preparing for Work video in this series. This process helps you to prepare yourself, plan and carry out the best and safest method to handle each load. As part of your planning during the think phase, you should be deciding if there are options to use mechanical aids such as forklifts, dollies and hand carts for lifting and moving your load. If that is not an option and you have to lift or move something manually, keep this in mind. There are 3 zones around your body. These zones can be described as green, yellow and red zones for lifting. The green zone is where the load should be placed around your body so that you're the strongest and your body position can support a safe lift without injuring yourself. So when you plan your work, one of your goals should be to set up the situation so that your load can remain in the green zone as much as possible. Specifically, the green zone is defined by the arc that your lower arm makes when you stand upright with the elbows close to the body and you bend your elbows from this position. As the load moves further away from the body into the yellow and red zones, you increase your risk of injury when lifting or moving the load. When lifting loads in the green zone, you'll be able to walk right up to the load and lift from your strongest position using the lifting basics. When the load is higher than waist level, but below shoulder level and close to the body, it is still in the green zone. You may be able to pivot the load off of the front edge of the surface it is resting on to lower it to an even better height. If the load is outside of the green zone but within arm's length away, it is in the yellow zone and injury risk is increased. Strategies include sliding the load to you first before lifting, moving your body as close to the load as possible while keeping the normal curvature of the spine by keeping your head up, butt out and stomach muscles tight. Try tilting the object or container to get it closer. Loads that are further than arm's length away or above shoulder height are in the red zone and have the highest risk of injury, particularly to the back and shoulders. Manually lifting in the red zones will be covered in the lifting from ground level and lifting above shoulder height videos. To recap, stop and ensure you're physically and mentally prepared for the task. Think before lifting and assess the hazards. Plan how to get the lift into the green zone. Reposition the load if necessary, especially if you find that the load is unbalanced or the handholds are awkward. Put the load down and readjust. Stay in the green zone during the lift.
Hi, I'm Margot Fraser. I'm a Canadian Certified Professional Ergonomist, and I'll be discussing safe lifting techniques for lifting loads from ground level. This video, Lifting from Ground Level, provides information on how to safely deal with work situations that involve manually lifting from ground level. This includes thinking about the work situation and the load so that you can prepare for and use the best and safest handling methods for the conditions. So always go through the stop, think, and act process detailed in the Preparing for Work video. Your first choice to lift loads from ground level should always be to use lifting or moving equipment such as forklifts and hand trucks. If there is no option but to manually lift, make sure that you use the techniques introduced in the Manual Handling Basics video. The type of lifting strategy selected may depend on your flexibility, the number of lifts that will be done, and your strength. Here are some of the methods that can be used for manual lifts from the ground. First is the squat lift. This lift is good for loads that fit between the knees and where the individual doing the lift has good knee and hip flexibility. This lift may increase the stress on the knees if frequent lifting is required and good form is not maintained. Get as close to the load as possible. Keep the head up, butt out, and tighten the stomach muscles. Make sure that the knees are over the toes and that you have a good grip on the load. It may help to tip the load onto a corner to get a better grip. Use the large muscles of the butt and legs to lift. The second lift is the stoop lift. This lift is also best for loads that fit between the knees and it requires less knee bending. Get as close to the load as possible, and then bend the knees, but no less than 90 degrees, and then hinge forward at the hips to the load. It is extremely important that the normal curvature be maintained, keeping the head up and butt out. Use the butt and leg muscles to start the lift. This lift places more stress on the back than the squat lift, so it is not as good for heavier lifts. The third type of lift is a straight leg lift. In some cases, you can get closer to the load if it's bulky or awkward using a straight leg lift, but make sure that the load is well within your lifting capability. This method requires excellent flexibility of the muscles in the back of your legs, as you must keep the normal curvature of the spine. Stand as close to the load as possible, keep the knees slightly bent, use good manual handling basics, and focus on using the butt muscles to initiate the lift. As you cannot use your leg muscles as effectively in this lift, the loads cannot be as heavy as can be done with a squat lift. For very light loads, and where there is something stable to hold on to, the golfer's reach can be used. Stand on one leg, holding on to something for balance, and hinge forward at the hips, keeping the normal curvature. There is a bit of twisting with this one, so don't use it for anything heavy. You may also be able to use a specialized tool so that you do not have to get right to the ground level. For example, a tire lifting device can be used to lever the tire up so that the full weight of the tire does not have to be taken. Remember to use good manual handling basics. To recap, before you start any manual handling job, stop and make sure you are physically and mentally prepared for the task. Then think and assess the hazards and the load to plan the best method to handle the material. Once you have thought everything through, then you can act to carry out your plan. If something changes or your plan is not going as anticipated, stop and begin the process again.
Hi, I'm Carmel Murphy. I'm a Canadian Certified Professional Ergonomist. This video, Lifting Above Shoulder Height, provides information on how to safely deal with work situations that involve manually lifting loads above shoulder height. This includes thinking about the work situation and the load so that you can prepare yourself for and use the best and safest handling methods for the conditions. So always go through the Stop, Think, Act process detailed in the Preparing to Work video. The weight you can safely lift above shoulder height is much less than the weight you can lift below shoulder height, and the risk for injury to your shoulders and back is also much higher, placing you in the red zone as outlined in the Manual Handling Basics video. There is also a risk of the load falling on you if you lose control of the load or it becomes unbalanced. Therefore, it is important to plan any work that involves lifting a load above shoulder height. Before lifting, see if you can lower the front portion of the load so it is below shoulder height. Pivot the load off the shelf and let it drop to a lower position so that the overhead lift is changed to a shoulder lift. Lower the load or raise yourself up. You want to try to move the load into the green zone between the waist and shoulder height. You may be able to do this using a forklift or other piece of equipment. If you need to work above shoulder height, plan for the safest possible technique. Assess whether the weight is equally distributed. Keep the heaviest part close to you. You may need to reposition the load to do this. Use good manual handling basics through the lift. Keep the normal curvature of the back, keep the load close, and don't twist. If you're moving something into an overhead position, get an edge in place on the high surface and slide and lever the load onto the surface so that you do not need to take its full weight. Plan for an escape route in case you lose control of the lift. If you do lose control, use your escape route and allow the object to fall. Alert anyone else in the vicinity who may be at risk. Report the incident. To recap, recognize that lifting above shoulder height has high risk for both shoulders and back. Stop and ensure you are physically and mentally prepared for the task. Think and assess the hazards. Determine whether lifting and moving equipment can be used, or whether you can reposition the load before lifting. Act to execute your plan. Plan for a safe lift. Should things not go as anticipated, stop. and begin the process again. Use your escape route if you lose control of the load.
Hi, I'm Dan Robinson. I'm a Canadian Certified Professional Ergonomist. This video, Carrying and Maneuvering, provides information on how to best carry and maneuver loads safely. This includes thinking about the work situation and the load so that you can prepare for and use the best and safest handling methods for the conditions. Always go through the stop, think, act process detailed in the Preparing to Work video. Plan ahead. Use mechanical handling equipment wherever possible to assist in all work to reduce the risk. Reduce the distance that the load will need to be carried by moving the load as close to the destination as possible. Walk the route first and make sure you have a clear path. Move or clean up any obstacles or slip-trip hazards. Open and unlock any doorways. Plan for where you are going to put the load down at the destination. Identify your strategy for getting through doorways, tight spaces, or around corners ahead of time. Keep the object close to the body and close to the midline of the body to minimize strain. Use the basic techniques described in the Manual Handling Basics video. If an object is heavier on one side than the other, keep the heavy side close to your body. Select gripping points that balance the load and give you a firm grasp of the object, but that allow you to drop the object and step back if you need to. Make sure you can see over the load and that it doesn't interfere with your ability to walk. Use gloves or padding to protect yourself from contact points that place pressure on the hands or any other part of the body. For long objects, lifting alternatives include the shoulder carry. Lift from one end and walk towards the middle until you reach the balance point. Place the object on one shoulder just in front of the balance point so it wants to start tilting backward. Control the position and angle of the object with your hand. Watch your turning radius. An alternative is the knuckle height carry. Lift from one end and walk towards the middle until you reach the balance point with the hands and the object at waist level. For two-person carries, have a plan to communicate clearly. One person leads and one follows directions. The follower confirms directions verbally. Both provide feedback on speed or hazards. It is also good to have an exit strategy that involves pre-planned communication. For example, I'm losing my grip down on 2. 1, 2, down. Have a plan to put the object down for a brief rest. Two-person carries on stairs will result in the lower person taking a larger load. Set up the carrying technique to allow the top person to lower the load slightly and the bottom person to raise the load slightly. A third person can be useful as a scout or door holder. To maneuver heavy, awkward items around corners or through tight doorways, protect yourself by maintaining a strong neutral posture throughout. Beware of finger pinch points between the object and doorways, walls, or railings. Don't force it, it either fits or it doesn't. If tipping large objects on their side, check overhead clearance, for example light fixtures in stairwells. Tip, walk the object, and turn it to negotiate corners. Hi, I'm Dan Robinson. I'm a Canadian Certified Professional Ergonomist, and I will be discussing how to safely and effectively use mechanical equipment such as dollies and hand trucks in manual handling work situations. This video, Pushing, Pulling, and Use of Handling Equipment, provides information on how to safely deal with work situations that involve the use of handling equipment. This includes thinking about the work situation and the load so that you can prepare for and use the best and safest handling methods for the conditions. Always go through the stop, think, act process detailed in the Preparing for Work video. To lift and move loads, your first choice should always be to use handling equipment, like a forklift or overhead crane, a hand jack or dolly, carts or other wheeled platforms. Determine what is available to you as part of your planning process. To most effectively use lifting and moving equipment, Orient the load to make access with the equipment as easy as possible. Reduce the distance that the load will need to be moved. Make sure that you have a clear path with no obstacles, enough aisle width to move the load, and no closed or locked doorways. Level dock plates and place ramps where you need them. Wedge doorways open or have someone in place to open the door for you. Select lifting or moving equipment that fits for your situation. The right equipment for the job is one that is in good working order, you are trained on and know how to use properly, requires the minimum amount of force and allows you to maintain a strong, neutral posture, and avoids the need to manually load heavy or awkward items onto or off of the equipment. For example, a cart or dolly may reduce the risk when carrying, but you may still have to lift to load them up. When using equipment that requires you to push or pull it, your technique is important for reducing risk of arm, shoulder, or back injury. It takes more force to get something moving than it does to keep it moving. Your technique is most critical at the initial push or pull. In most cases, pushing is preferred over pulling, but this will depend on how the wheels or casters are set up on the specific equipment and whether you can see over or past the load. Equipment with a hinging handle is designed to be pulled. For pushing, if the device has 4 swiveling wheels, lock the front wheels to assist with steering. Straighten the wheels and test the load to make sure that it will move before you begin to push. Keep your arms bent and elbows close to the body. Place your hands at about waist height. Keep the normal curvature of the spine and drive your hips forward with your legs. This lets you use the larger muscles of your legs and body weight rather than just arm strength. Gradually increase force until the object moves. For pulling, if the device has 4 swiveling wheels that can be locked in place, lock the rear wheels to assist with steering. Align the wheels and test the load first to make sure that it will move. Pulling a wagon-style handle that can be managed with one hand, bring the handle forward to one side of the body and bend at the elbow. Pulling with 2 hands, ensure a clear path and walk backwards with arms bent and elbows close to the body.